Hey everybody, what's up? My name is Kevin. I'm just an ordinary guy making a testimony. I'm no different from the next human being on this crazy planet that we all inhabit. But I do have a very amazing story in my life. It took place about approximately 5 or so years ago. And I'd like to share that in the hopes that it might help somebody else that might experience something like this. I'm the kind of person that's very curious by nature, and I really wanted to know the meaning of my existence. My whole life since I was a kid, I've been curious about, dinosaurs and aliens and all of those sorts of things. And for whatever reason, 5 years ago, it got to be very important to me to find some truth, to find out some answers to all this, right? I was dead set. I wasn't going to accept anything less than the complete answer and proof for how I got here and why I'm here at all, which is a question I think many of us ask, right? But I tried every way and I tried every road that I could think of to go down to pursue after these answers and this truth, and to seek happiness, completeness, all the things a human being really is pre-wired to seek, let's put it that way, in this world. And up until this time, 5 years ago, I had never been satisfied with any of the answers or things that I found along any road that I went down to try to find them in the world. I became this incident that happened, though, began 5 years ago. I became acutely aware all of a sudden, by accident really, of the spiritual realm, which I had absolutely no earthly idea previously about. I had no contact with it. I had no exposure to it. I had no clue that it even existed at all. And frankly, I don't think I believed that it did. But anyways, I had real trouble, even as a youth, as I said, wrapping my head around the fact that I kept hearing, and I heard it from, religious circles, that the few times that I actually went, to church, which wasn't very often. But anyways, I kept hearing that there's this thing called a soul, and something inside me said, well, there could be, but it just doesn't make any sense to me with an analytical mind like I have, and one that requires proof of anything I'm going to sign on to believe, right? I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe something like that. I thought there were many questions, right? I mean, this thing that lives forever, this part of us that lives forever, how is that even possible? How can anything live forever, right? Is what I asked myself. Everything that I'm familiar with here in this dimension, let's call it, has some date, end date, or expiration date, let's put it, right? Everything alive eventually dies. So I simply couldn't accept or understand that there could be another realm or part of me even that cannot be seen by the eye, maybe, but that is still fully me and lives forever. That was absurd to me, right? It's even absurd, a little bit absurd when I think about it now, but I know some things now that I didn't know then because of this experience I'm going to share. I was really confused about all this until this chance encounter with the spiritual realm that I later understood was not a chance at all, but a revealing for which I'm grateful for to this day. And I just want to share it. It has to do with something called sleep paralysis. And I make this video for anyone who might be suffering from this, to educate a little bit about what happened to me. So allow me, if you will, to recount what happened to me just these 5 or so years ago, and what I learned finally to be the truth of not only my existence and purpose, but the answer to how all of the things in this universe got here and why they are here at all. I happen to have a degree in industrial engineering, and I'm a very evidence-based person. As I said earlier in my life, I was just not prepared to accept anything as truth until or unless it was fully proven to me to be truth. So I was actually in the middle of this huge effort at this time to uncover these truths about myself. I had this sudden interest in going down any road I could to explain how I got here and why I was here, and the universe and all these things. And science was my natural go-to area to explain things, right? I was taking hours and hours on the computer and research, going down every road that I could find that might lead me to provable truth. I researched the evidence for extraterrestrial beings and all of the theories that say that human beings could somehow have been planted on this planet by such things. I looked into what physics and science says about other dimensions, and I had an exposure, let's term it that way, to a religious body in a church, as I said, that told me that I was created by God and that I had the Spirit inside of me. But honestly, none of these things ever convinced me of any tangible truth until this 30-day period, which happened some 5 years ago or so, in which I was radically exposed suddenly to a very unnerving and very real spiritual world, in which, as it turned out, there were things that had such hatred for mankind there that I was just so shocked and taken aback that I honestly almost sought professional help at this time to try to explain what was happening to me, because it was very crazy. And I'll get into the detail of that. As it turned out, though, quickly I'll say, I had not lost my mind at all, and what I was experiencing was very, very real. This period in which I was enlightened, I'm going to say, to the whole other dimension and realm that I was somehow clashing with all of a sudden, turned out to be more real than the world in which I see all around me and touch and hear and smell in some ways. Okay, I know many of you are probably saying to yourself, I wonder what drugs he was on, right? I get that. But I assure you that I was perfectly sober and sober-minded and perfectly sane during this time. Just was a guy searching for answers like anyone. And it actually ended up coming to me. And that's amazing, but it's true. All right, then let me get to the point finally. The only other thing to know now is that I was suffering from as I said, from what science calls sleep paralysis, which, if you don't know, is some state of being that happens to a person sometimes where we wake up partially, yet not fully during the night, or during a day nap also. Sometimes it happens and we're sort of stuck in this in-between type of state. In my case, it was very strange indeed, because I would have open eyes. I would see the room around me. I could even see the digital clock change its numbers, but I could not move. Could barely speak in mumbles, weird, like I would try to speak, but it was like my mouth was in mud, thick mud or something. Literally paralyzed the rest of the body, but awake enough to know what was going on around me and see what was going around me in the room. And even a time or two when another person was present there, they said they heard me mumbling, and they could tell that I was in some desperate state but couldn't cry out. So as I said, this time in my life, I was searching for all these answers and meaning to everything, and looking into every piece of evidence that I could find about the origins of man, my origins, and things that could explain some things that happened in my life and all that other stuff. Extraterrestrials, other planets, God, demons, all of that, because I was determined to satisfy these questions that I had since I was a young child. All right, suddenly these sleep paralysis attacks became much more frequent at this time, and much more serious than I had no idea why all this was happening or what triggered that. I would get episodes during daytime naps even now, which never happened before. And literally every night as well, where I was trapped in this state that I was describing to you. And if you haven't experienced this, it truly is if one is trapped or held down somehow, unable to move. And it's very unnerving, to say the least. It's very frightening. I began to try to cry out during this times to anyone who might hear when in the middle of one of these attacks, but I could never get my voice above a mumble. It's very frustrating. It was like a garbled, like eerie sound that would come out of my mouth, and it wasn't really formed words. So I began to first become aware that I felt totally not alone when this was occurring. So this was an added thing. All of a sudden, all this time, years in my life, when I, from time to time, experienced sleep paralysis, I never felt what I felt during this time suddenly, as if I wasn't alone. In other words, it really felt as if someone or something else was there with me. And every time I would wake out of one of these attacks, come fully awake, I would just brush it off and put it to the back of my mind, because I had no explanation at all for what this even could be or how this even could be happening. And I did entertain the idea that my mind was somehow snapping or breaking, or something was going on. I researched the scientific explanation, which was not convincing to me at all. And here's the best description that I could find, which only made me fear more and have more questions. It says, sleep paralysis is a feeling of being conscious but unable to move. It occurs when a person passes between stages of wakefulness and sleep. During these transitions, you may be unable to move or speak for a few seconds, up to a few minutes. Some people may also feel pressure or a sense of choking. That's all fine and great, and that's true, but how in the heck is this even possible? And as I learned when I researched it, it happens to millions of people around the world, perhaps hundreds of millions or more, but at least millions, right? So I thought to myself, what the hell's going on, right? And as I said, it was very sudden, but it was getting much worse each time. And I had no idea how to even begin to understand why. Nothing I could do in the internet research would tell me any answers about what causes this. And there were many speculations, but none of it really turned out to be helpful. Whatever the case, I got to the point where I feared even going to sleep, which is a very unsettling state and feeling to be in. And I knew that somehow I needed answers and needed them quickly. Somehow my cry was heard one night, and I can't describe how to this day how that happened, but it happened. And suddenly one night, I think it was right around 3, it's usually when I wake up at night, it's around 3 a.m., which is strange, but it's true. More often than not, it's that time. Sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later, but more often than not, it was that time. And everything on this night in my world changed forever. There's no way that what happened that night, and then night after night for some 30 days subsequent to this, there's no way that could have happened. And yet, I tell you, just as sure as the sun rose today and will set tonight, that it did happen. In fact, I was in the middle of one of these sleep paralysis attacks, trying desperately to get myself unstuck from this state and awake. And this was a particularly strong hold on this occasion that was on me, to the extent that it literally felt, when I finally snapped out of it and woke up, it felt as if something was pressing both of my shoulders to the bed. And it had some great weight behind it as well. It was pretty strong, whatever it was. My eyes were open as I tried to move when I was in the middle of this, but I could not. I watched the clock change from 3:02 to 3:03 to perhaps 3:10, or maybe a little bit later. I sat there and watched it change every time, but could not move. I'm not sure what I cried out in my mind, but something told me to cry out to whatever other dimension there might be, or spiritual realm, or whatever was happening, to God, even if He existed. And in some words, I don't know, or thought that I had formed, I did that. That's exactly what I did. I cried out to whatever might be there. Instantly, it seemed, I was released and fully awake after forming this cry. It was so sudden that it took me some seconds to even gather myself and gather my mind together to understand where I even was. I closed my eyes, I opened them, and closed them again, making sure that I was awake. And then I sat fully up in the bed with my whole upper body perpendicular to the bed, in a sitting position. In other words, my whole upper body had come up into a sitting position. And as I focused my eyes forward, I thought that I saw something move out of the corner of my right eye, which was the side of me closest to the nearest wall, and the side of the bed that faced the nearest wall, which was probably 3 feet or 4 feet away from the bed. Some kind of dark shadow, is all I can say, moved there in the corner of my eye, and I looked away. I looked the other way, not toward it, because I really didn't want to see anything. That very much shook me as the first time anything like this had ever happened. It's a very unsettling and terrifying thing to anyone who's ever experienced sleep paralysis alone, but then add this to it, and it was just too much for my mind to even want to handle or to process. But something in the back of my mind was telling me that if something is there, I need to know about it. I need to know what's going on here, because this is all very bizarre, and I had no answers, and I had a million questions and no answers. All right, but in the next few moments, I had no choice but to see that something truly was there. I managed to scoot myself all the way to the bottom edge of this king-size bed, it's a California king, so it's very large. And it took several scoots to get there to the edge, to the bottom of the bed. But now I was sitting at the bottom of the bed with my legs hanging off the front of the bed. I was rubbing my eyes and trying to, focus my eyes in the dark room. Now the room was, I say dark, it was dark, but it was sort of twilighty coming through the window, so there was like a gray light, a light grayness in the room. All right. The only thing I can tell or explain is that this thing, whatever it was, the shadow moved now around the corner of the bed and across my vision in front of me. And I realized there was, in fact, something there, which really unnerved me, right? So whatever had moved on the side of the bed at the corner of my eye caught just a moment before now came directly in front of my vision as I sat up on the bottom edge of the bed, scooted all the way to the edge, awake fully. And my life changed forever at that moment, because I saw what can be described as this 6 foot tall figure in the blackest black that can ever be imagined. It was so black, I don't think any marker could even do justice to it. It was so black that it stood out in the grayness of the room. It was an outline of a man, I guess, wearing like a full black robe with a hood, and the hood was pulled up over the head. But this was no human at all. It was, in some ways, I could see almost through it. It was not a tangible, solid figure. It had no legs, no feet, no arms coming out from the robe that I could see. And it didn't walk as a man walks, but glided very smoothly into and in front of my vision, in front of my eyes, and I could see. It couldn't have been more than 2 feet in front of me, and I could clearly see, as clearly as one can see something like this. Needless to say, I almost freaked out completely, but instead of screaming out, I was absolutely like mesmerized, because I really did want answers, and if this was the way I had to get them, then I had to get them this way. But I couldn't gain comprehension of what I was seeing. It confounded me, because I didn't really believe in things like this. So, but it turned its head to face me as it slid or glided by slowly across my field of vision, and all I saw, in place of where a face should be, or where I expected to see a face, was this swirling black smoke, like curls of jet black smoke writhing around inside of this area where I expected to see a face. I jumped back on the bed, like scooted back a couple of feet to put some distance between me and this thing, because it was right up close, personal. But I could not stop looking at it. I had never in my life imagined anything like this alone, let alone seeing it in front of me. And this is a little comical, but this actually happened. I cried out at the moment. I said, "Are you kidding me, God?" Or "God, are you kidding me?" I really did. And I think I said that about 2 or 3 times. I really don't know why I felt I should address God, but I did. That's just what came out of my mouth and my mind at the time. So I watched this thing go very confidently, it seemed, and very smoothly, right across the bedroom and right through the wall on the other side of the room. It just melted into and vanished through a cinder block wall, because my bedroom was in what was the basement of that house. Now I knew, and I don't know how I knew, but I knew instantly that this thing was from some other realm, from some other dimension. It was there, and yet it was half there and half not there. And I knew one more thing, which was it was not there to bring good tidings or to help me in any way. In fact, I could feel somehow, I guess in the spirit is all I can explain it, that this thing had great hatred, had great evil to it. Pardon me, and I could feel that it was in no way afraid of me whatsoever. This was so shocking to me that I told no person of this for a long time, and I even convinced myself, or tried to, more accurately, that it was not real and that I was hallucinating or seeing things. But a person cannot see or experience what I did that night and be the same, I don't think. Nevertheless, I put it out of my mind, and nothing more happened for the next 2 nights. But on the 3rd night after this, I was attacked again. It was much like the first time, except this thing, the thing that I saw this time, was a little different. This was about the same height, maybe 6 feet or so, but I could not see a hood this time. It was something different. I just saw the outline, like a man-like shape with a body and a head. This one had arms of some sort, but I didn't see any hands. It's the whole thing though was blurry looking, like it was changing every moment somehow. The best way I can describe it, and it was very close to this, is the effect that they used in the Predator movies. If you've ever seen these, where the Predator turns on its camouflage, it's almost like light goes mostly through it, but you can see something going on there that's like sort of real weird. It's like changing shape all the time, and it's semi-transparent. This is what it was. It was just like that, and it was very bizarre. All right. I know it sounds really strange, but this is the truth. This is what happened. I'm making this video to share that, again, this is 100% what happened, and it's the truth of what occurred. And I've never been the same and never will be the same. It gets even more crazy now for the next month in my life after that, because for about 30 days, somewhere around there, I estimate, things came at night, every single night after that, and attacked me without me doing anything different in my life, except I found myself over the course of the days as they went by, and about the 3rd or 4th incident night of this happening, starting to pray for answers. It's the only thing I could think of that might help. I couldn't think of any other way to explain it, and I couldn't think of anywhere else to go for help. I tried in the first 3 or 4 days to get human help from this world, but nobody knew what. Nobody had a clue, knew what to do. Even in the church I went to, they told me that it was demonic and from the spiritual realm, but they didn't know why. They didn't know how to get rid of it. Nothing like that. So I knew a few things. I started to realize a few things, which are that these things that were coming, for whatever reason they were coming, they were there to cause harm and the most fear that they could. And they very much succeeded in this for this period. I knew that they were somehow demonic in nature as well, and not what the world would call good entities, but bad ones. I started to pray every night as an automatic response, and some kind of revelation of truth started to develop in me as I did this. I realized that these were demonic entities, demonic spirits, if you want to call it that, of some sort, of some kind. I knew little more than that, but I knew that. It was somehow clear to me then. I deduced or deducted that if demons were real, and believe me, if you would have seen what I was seeing, you would have also had no choice but to believe this, then the whole spiritual realm must be real. And then that God must also be real. And then that his whole story must be real, right? Then I thought to myself, one of these days during this incredible trial, it was a trial period and revelation period in my life, that I might actually have a soul that I heard so much about in church. I might live forever. In other words, some part of me somewhere in some state of awareness and being, right? If there was this other dimension that could interact in this manner with ours, with me, then perhaps I have a soul or spirit that would go there when my body dies. All of this started coming to me just from my contact with God. I was really more confused, though, than settled during this period, anyways. And believe me when I say there were many evil things that visited in the room during this period. Sometimes I could see them, sometimes I couldn't see them at all, but I just sensed the presence. And there were smells that I've never smelled before in that house, and all sorts of things, different things happening, which were confirming to me without any doubt that this other realm that they must be coming from was real, in fact, real. I also learned, because as it turned out, this was all from God's grace to teach me, that the name of Jesus had some kind of power over these things, and they hate it. They hate it, absolutely hated it when I said it, either out loud or even in my head. They knew. It didn't matter which one, but they hated this name. I learned that I could break out of the paralysis just by calling out the name of Jesus. And if I started praying when any of these entities were there, they quickly shot out of the room when they heard this name. Very bizarre to me, but true. What ended up happening was that after the 30-day period, I guess God was satisfied in my repentance, because I was called to start repenting of my life and the things I was doing. I somehow knew were sin, and I somehow knew I had to do this. It all stopped after 30 days, and I have never had a single incident of sleep paralysis since then, and it had happened for years before in my life. I came to believe and to actually be assured of the fact that, as awesome and unbelievable as it sounds and sounded to me then, the whole story of God and creation, Jesus, and my purpose in that story was true. I knew the devil was real, and I knew that God was real. Both of those things became very apparent to me, and I learned that the name of Jesus really is the name above all names, and it had complete authority over every dark thing that tried to get me in those nights and days. There's a lot more to my story, but I thought I would post this for anyone first who might be experiencing anything like this during sleep, and to share with you all that there is an answer, and it's not medicine in my case or any psychological exercise or practice. It's a spiritual thing. And I'm going to leave contact information for me if anyone is interested, email and Facebook contact. I will surely talk about this with anyone and my story and my life since, if anyone's interested, or if you just want help with experiencing sleep paralysis, I'll try to do that as well, at least in my experience and with what I could share from my case. I thank you all for your time.